So for a start, usually we ask very technical questions, but if you're open to it, have you ever watched a movie where you would say this movie inspired me and it's part of the vision, became part of the vision for my life?
No.
Was there ever a book, maybe by cypherpunk or cyberpunk book that inspired you?
No, I've got other books that have inspired me. Adam Smith's on moral sentiments, Rose Surfton by Hayek, a lot of books by economists, things by Bastiat. Over here that I quite like. I got this one's very good. Nice simple book.
Huh? Yeah. The Way the World Works.
The Way the World Works. So I do enjoy cyberpunk type readings and cyberpunk readings. I like Snow Crash and others, but I wouldn't say they inspire me.
And so
they're usually rather dystopian for a start, and I'm not dystopian. So
I see. And now, for everybody who works a lot with computer devices, do you use Windows, Linux, or Mac, if you can choose?
Yes, yes, and no.
Okay. And do you use
Macs?
Yes.
Windows, because Windows is what most people use, so therefore that's what one should put on. Linux, I used to use all, and in some ways prefer, because you have more control, but then most of the apps aren't on there, and this is the real world. So for math, things like that, has to be Linux, because at the end of the day, Windows just chews up memory too badly to run network simulations and things like that.
Do you use mobile phones, Android or iPhone?
Yes, which is Samsung, so Android.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting to just see a little bit more the personal side of the man that is attempting to build a world money or the commodity ledger.
And I think too.
And let's talk about the business N-Chain. Why did you choose to start it in London? I know it's kind of decentralized. You have employees all over the world, but the base is in London compared to Silicon Valley or New York.
Australia is too far away and too difficult. Although I used to work with the government in some aspects, just the fact that I'm building things that you mentioned, encryption or crypto, and they're problematic. Australia's backwards. I mean, lots of nice people there and whatever else, but they're in the middle of nowhere, etc. I have a family, so that takes part of it. We considered other areas. We considered Edinburgh, but I got fairly much a no way from the wife. She's Singaporean, and she didn't want to live in Scotland because it's too cold. We visited there; it's very nice, but there'd be no way on earth for my wife to live in Scotland or anywhere that cold. She doesn't like cold. We considered Canada for the same reason. It was too cold. Other places in Europe, well, there are places that would have been nice and whatever else, but France at the moment is too socialist. Germany, I can't speak a word of German. So I'm not going to try. I got enough sort of learning language with Chinese and trying to actually keep up on my French and trying not to sound like I'm murdering the language, as one Frenchman told me. Yeah, London's a good place. It's financial capital of the world at one point in history, close to everything. Before Brexit sort of came about, it was integrated into Europe. We'll see how that works out over time.
I see. So that's the reason for London. And now let's talk about, of course, Bitcoin SV has a very unique and innovative way of being a solution for businesses, but there should be some competitors that you consider like serious competitors that would fill the gap.
No, I don't. I don't consider any of them. I consider everyone's looked at what Core's been doing and the misunderstanding of Bitcoin. We've had 10 years of people utterly. So I don't think we've got a competitor. Actually, I think what has happened is we've been running this way, and they've spent 10 years running that way, and unfortunately the race is that way for the finish line.
I see. So when you consider, but still many people are still thinking the old way, otherwise Bitcoin SV would be already the mainstream. So why,
I disagree there too. I mean, number one, we need to scale it. It's not going to be mainstream until it's scaled. It then needs business solutions built. It needs applications built. Hyperledger is a great scam. It's a way of flicking off bureau services as a different name. I mean, that's what IBM has been doing since the 60s now. They've sold DB2 and other type bureau services. That is the IBM sort of sham business where they lock you in and whatever else. And it's no different, and it's still a dead end. It's a horrible, horrible database that will never work properly. And Ethereum is a joke. They've not understood that sharding is an NP hard or NP complete problem, depending on which way you do it. Either way, it's a dead end. People think that Bitcoin's about decentralization. It's not. Decentralization is a tool. The reason why DigiCash and eCash and DLP and others all went down the toilet was there's a single point of failure that basically took them down. Bitcoin's about competition. So Shaum didn't understand that, and he wanted to run everything. And I mean, his whole trying to get a percentage of Microsoft so that they'd run it was just stupid.
Excuse me, can you explain me who's Shaum?
David Shaum, inventor of DigiCash back in the first version, 93, came out with the company years later, was running, Mark Twain Bank was issuing it, Deutsche Bank had started using DigiCash.
So, okay, but have you taken a look at the new Amazon managed blockchain service that they are coming up with? Is that kind of a competitor?
Database.
Okay.
It's a database. So what?
I see. And so
if you think a company can ever bring out a version of blockchain, then you don't understand blockchain, not the first aspect of it. You can't. The key aspect is not a socialist circle jerk distributed, everyone runs things. It is competition. It is corporate competition. It was always meant to end up in data centers. It was always meant to be big players investing lots and lots of money to form a hyper-connected central network. Now, basically something with a high centrality that all the nodes connect to.
And when you say competition, do you mean inter-miner competition or inter-blockchain competition?
Inter-miner. There's no such thing as inter-blockchain. This ends as one or none. It's a binary decision.
I understand that, but on the way to the one blockchain, there will be competition, of course.
Eventually, but not much.
I see.
I got annoyed with how things were going, and I've spent the last half decade patenting about everything you need to actually make it work, including SPV.
And you said in the past Visa could or should switch to Bitcoin SV eventually or in 2 years. And
they will. All these things come down to cost. I mean, the entirety of transaction services, bureau services, and whatever else all come down to cost. Now, Visa's rather insecure, highly insecure. Their network's garbage. They can't scale. Their peak scaling is in the order of 60,000 transactions a second in the lab. We're going to build up to at least 1 million. Steve wants to aim for 6 million in the next couple of years.
Do you foresee a higher demand for Visa usage when the price is lower for Visa?
Potentially, but Visa's not a competitor to Bitcoin. People don't get that. Visa isn't a money network, it's a credit network. And Bitcoin doesn't get rid of credit. People still want to buy things before they've earned them. I mean, this is the stupidity here. Everyone running around going, Bitcoin makes you your own bank. No, it doesn't. It doesn't stop credit either.
And you said they could shut down their fraud department if they switch to Bitcoin SV. Maybe I'm a little bit picky when I say there will still be people that take the money but won't deliver, so they might have still a fraud department.
Then you've got escrow, but then you've got escrow contracts and other such things. So that's all doable. If you want to have an escrowed money account because you don't trust the party, then go for it. We've got smart contract templates for that as well. The idea being that payments can happen to every stage, which can be tracked immutably. You can see the shipping information where your thing is. You can know which shipping container that you happen to be in, not just it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You could actually monitor and track everything that's happening with your parcel.
Yeah, and I agree. The vision is really big, and there is a huge potential. Especially I think at the Bangkok summit, you also talked about a client who might want to save real estate information, also including the 3D file of the real estate. So there is a promise to do something that wasn't possible to before, and also you have the clear evidence. Like before, people needed to put their official people, like lawyers or needed to put their stamp on stuff, and now Bitcoin can replace this.
No, Bitcoin doesn't replace that. That's where people keep going wrong. Lawyers will still put their stamp on it because that's not what lawyers do.
So they do that. They use a digital stamp then.
Yes, and under UNICITRAL and other law, digital certificates are all valid. There is a reason why people use lawyers. You can do a property transaction without lawyers right now. You don't need to have it conveyed. You can actually buy these things. If you're not taking a mortgage out, you don't need a lawyer at all. You don't need a solicitor. The reason you have conveyancers and solicitors is to stop fraud. And the bank protects themselves by ensuring that if you take a mortgage out, all that's done, because the bank cares about being protected. Now, anyone who's smart will actually go out and pay the money to get those lawyers and everything like that to check. Because even if it's on a blockchain, doesn't stop people doing things. Now, the reality is you're still going to have stamp duty because government can charge you stamp duty. You're still going to have to go through all the requirements that is there. It will be much simpler because conveyancing can now be digital. And you can basically check that this was validly sold. See on the thing 5 years ago, there was a sale. It was sold to two tenants as joint ownership, husband and wife. They've divorced, but don't worry, it's okay because both of them have co-signed. That sort of thing. And
we could already hear the Bitcoin SV network or currency commodity ledger is government friendly. You also talked in the past about it. It makes government more honest, maybe more transparent.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, this is what people don't get. Anonymity doesn't help anyone. it helps bad guys. The only people who benefit from a completely anonymous system are criminals, full stop. And that includes government criminals. I mean, what people seem to not understand in this world is criminals are people, government are people, and just like you get good and bad people in the police, in banks, in ambulance services, in government, you get good and bad people everywhere. It's not going to be solved because blockchain.
So, yeah, I get that. Another point, I think, where many people go wrong is that it's not either or. A currency for people with microtransactions, payment on the browser. It's not, and a commodity ledger. It's both. And what you
Correct.
and it's already a fully working microtransaction and full payment instant transaction currency. And what you're adding now is the commodity ledger, and that's going to need the scale, but it's also going to finance.
We're not adding
all the mining.
the commodity ledger. We're repairing it. It was there in the first days of Bitcoin. It was always designed this way. It's just a few people like Core and whatever else came out with this idea that blockchains don't scale. We can't put things on it because they had the wacky concept that everyone has to run a node. So I'm not sure if that was intentional to wreck everything or just stupidity, but nothing was ever meant to be run that way. The truth of the matter is, companies compete. They fight to have bigger data centers, more efficiency, allowing people to actually have a distributed network of machines that connect, allowing peer-to-peer communications, which isn't the blockchain. That's where people go wrong. Peer-to-peer electronic cash is you and I exchange a transaction, and that network over there settles it. The peer-to-peer part of Bitcoin is people. It's the bit that one of the first things that Core took out of the network was the peer-to-peer. Bitcoin Core is not peer-to-peer.
And is the reason that Bitcoin Core kind of derailed while trying to go to larger scale with Bitcoin, is that the reason why you're also taking a more active role since about 2 years?
Unfortunately, yes. It's if I don't sort of guide this, people come up with all these silly socialist, and I'll say socialist because every anarchist is really a socialist. There's no such thing as an anarcho-capitalist because capitalism requires law. So by definition, you can't be anarcho-capitalist. You're a socialist. So call it whatever you want. There is one way Bitcoin works. It is capitalism. And that does not mean all these other things that people get wrong. It is not mercantilist. It is not exploitative. Capitalism is not about state control. It is about free trade, open trade. And that doesn't mean that you have no market controls. It means that you have a system, as Hayek said, that is controlled and regulated, as Adam Smith sort of said, where government stays out of the economy but regulates its flow. So.
I see. So, yeah, I myself call myself a minarchist just for information.
I'm happy with that one. I prefer as small a government as works feasibly, which isn't zero. You need police. You can't have a scenario where people say, oh, everyone can hire their own police. It doesn't work. People have tried that one. In Victorian England, there was, and also in America too, in Boston, there was a stage where people had competing fire brigades. Same thing happened in Rome, actually. Croesus made his money because of fire brigades. And what would happen is the two fire brigades would come and fight. And it was a mess. Very anarchist. And what would generally happen is the whole neighborhood would burn down and no one got their fires put out. And then the firemen would run in and basically steal everything before it burnt.
I see. So that's the economic argument to have law and to cooperate, to be government friendly, I understand. Another question that is
so much government friendly. It's not aggressive government. It's enabling services that help everyone, and it's not saying government friendly, because if you're a corrupt government, Bitcoin's your worst enemy.
I get that. Another economic question probably is, at one point in time, you must have made the decision to invest your time into a proof of work coin instead of a proof of stake coin. Can you explain what?
Why?
Yes.
I mean, there's no such thing as a proof of stake coin. So why would I waste any time thinking about it?
Okay.
I mean, I've wasted too much time writing about it with basically showing that it's an oligarchical system, pointing out that you can't shard it because it's actually the only way you can shard it is to have one group dictate what happens. As soon as you have a 51% control by one group who gets to set the rules, unlike Bitcoin where it's competing for keeping the rules the same, then you end up with a scenario where, well, I've got 80% of the money. How about I spend 30% and then vote myself more money so that I have 80% again? That's part of how proof of stake works.
Yeah.
It's an infinitely inflatable system designed to keep the maximum holders as maximum holders. It starts as a cartel because there will always be a scenario where the top 50% vote themselves to be the top 80%, in which case you end up now with the new top 50% vote themselves more, or even potentially one of those happens to be close to the 50%, and eventually you end up with one single party who controls everything.
And you think it's unlikely that this is going to happen with miners, that somebody acquires 51% of all miners and then rewrites the rules?
1% is not an attack. This is the thing that everyone got wrong. 51% attack means you haven't read the white paper. If you read the white paper, there's this section that says miners are incentivized to follow the best chain, even if they're an attacker. Now, part of that comes into scale. And when we're having people split off like ABC did and BTC did before, and they're changing the rules, they're creating something completely different. So what they're doing is not forking Bitcoin. They are splitting and starting a new network that has different rules and airdrops everyone who was there before, and basically lies that it's a change. So BTC radically altering the system, or ABC radically altering the system, adding new opcodes, making it incompatible, that basically isn't forking the chain and competing or whatever else. It is creating a completely new chain. Now, that's only possible because of two reasons. One, scale. We have small blocks. And two, scale. We're not used much. If you end up scaling, none of this becomes possible. Now, take, for instance, if you have tokens and other things on the blockchain. If people have a housing registry and it's stored, you can't fork. Think what happens if you fork. What is the real housing registry? You don't have two copies of your house. It's this wacky, stupid, baby kiddie idea that people like Ethereum guys have, who haven't woken up and realized that they're out of play school yet, and think that you can make everything digital. This is a real world. It's not Ready Player One. This is the real world. This house exists. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether the title's electronic or not. There's only one. There will only be one.
One problem I have when I explain to friends and relatives Bitcoin is still that they feel guilty for using so much energy. And have you ever found a short way to explain to them why it's important? I mean, I get it, but it takes me like 5 minutes to explain to them.
Realizing that you're fucking spending more money in everything you do than Bitcoin. Ask them if they feel guilty when they do a Google search.
Yeah.
Do you feel guilty when you use WhatsApp? I mean, and get past this fucking socialist bullshit. And I'm going to say this way, with this whole wanky climate fucking shit, the climate of Earth has changed 4 degrees up, 8 degrees down in the last ice age period. It was 200 years ago, it was much colder and then much warmer. And then 400 years ago, we had a mini ice age. Stop the bullshit, okay? I don't really give a shit about this proven science bit because I've read it. I worked on teams. It's not bloody proven science. Next, if you want to fix it, it's called economics. The reality of all this is bloody do more, have more people, pull them out of their freaking bootstraps, stop this bloody Sierra Club bullshit where you're aiming to kill people. You're a fucking murderer. That's what I'm going to tell them. You're a fucking want-to-be murderer. You kill people because every person who doesn't get access to electricity, doesn't get power, doesn't get that growth is someone who has a shorter life. Okay, so this whole idea, stop wanking about with these stupid bloody bullshit rhetorical asshole questions and wake up and smell the fact that you're using Google, you hypocritical little shit. That's what you tell them.
Okay, okay, I'm going to try that. I have a friend who is still skeptical about Bitcoin SV, and I want to talk about some of his skepticism. One is that the Bitcoin SV might not be horizontally scalable. I mean, we are going deep into technicals, but it's enough if you say like you're working on it or you have solved it already.
Oh, it's always been bloody scalable. It's a whole lot of wanky stuff about, oh, we can't run it on my Raspberry Pi on my laptop. Look up the post about everything ends up on data centers. It does. That's the way the world works.
So to a layperson like me, the question is the mining software already running on multi-core or on a single core? On N-chain?
Mining software, that's the first problem. That's irrelevant. Miners grind through hashes. A miner doesn't give a rat's whether it's a 1 meg or a 100 zettabyte block. Miners don't care. What you need to do is you need to take all those transactions and run them in parallel and then communicate that. As for the Chinese firewall, already got a solution for that, and no, the patent's still pending, so going through certain write-up stages, so I won't discuss it, but all I can say is the Chinese firewall's not a problem. If we have 100 petabyte blocks tomorrow, the Chinese firewall is that. The propagation, this whole idea of propagation is people who have never run big networks. When I worked in the Australian Stock Exchange in the 90s, we were doing higher volume in a multicast distributed network. And that's the 90s on VAX machines.
Yeah, there's the lack of imagination and the lack of full comprehension of Moore's law. And yeah, so
also a lack of comprehension of people who haven't run on real networks. That's the problem with this anarchist bent here. We don't have people who have run on bank networks or military networks or anything like this. I've got 6 petabytes downstairs. I ran a network with over 100 petabytes a couple of years ago. My processing power, sort of a couple of years ago, was in the order of 112,000 CPU cores. So, welcome to the real world.
Yeah. Although I understand that it was appealing at first when your own PC was running it, but it's still appealing to hold your own key. So that's the main selling point to the individuals now that are technologically forward and interested in progress. They hold their own keys. Unfortunately, they cannot run the whole software
as
anymore
long as they
on
do
their computer.
it right. The problem is, again, what they should be doing is they should be holding a key and never signing with that key. They should use a hierarchical single-use key every time and throw it away. So use a key that can even be put on a CA and certified and all that stuff, proving that it's you, and then protect your identity by having a simple relationship between sort of 2 additive ECDSA keys equal new key. Sign with that. And then throw it away. Single-use key. The whole Bitcoin security model and privacy model is based on you don't reuse your keys.
And I think that's already implemented in Handcache, if I'm correct.
Correct. Yes. You don't need to worry about knowing your keys because, well, why do you want to know your keys? You have a new key every time, and then you can't trace me. If you don't know whether it's me or a store, how do you trace me? So if I have Amazon using a separate key for every customer for every sale, and you don't know whether it's my key has changed or Amazon's key, how the hell are you ever going to track that?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's of course, you always explain then, if the police finds somebody who did illicit business, they have to do it the old school way. They have to go to the shop. They have to have to track down the phone of the thief, and then they can still track his transactions. But they cannot they cannot just download the whole blockchain and see what everybody's doing. So there is the certain amount of privacy for the individual compared to the government.
So when I joined the military in the 90s, and when my uncle and other people in my family were doing things, there was, it wasn't this big push for metadata. People used to do what is human intelligence, and you would actually go out there and you'd investigate things, and you would get records, and analysts would go through bank records, and you'd follow the money trail and all this other sort of stuff. Now, honestly, we're lazy. The NSA metadata bit is lazy. It gives bad, shitty results. This is, everyone says, oh, look what we've done. I actually think the results are shittier. The way that it used to work came up with more prosecutions. It stopped more drug deals. It did whatever else. It actually helped better policing.
I would now. I'm switching.
Thank you, NSA, for fucking things up.
Yeah. I'm not an expert in policing, but I'm happy to hear that the policing work would improve. And I'm interested to hear your version. For me, about the 30 megabyte block propagation problem, my explanation is you have to focus on the miners that provide 90% of the hash power instead of the 10% miners that have the oldest hardware, the oldest versions running, that take the longest.
Other than problems with the software that we're removing, like randomized delay times, maximum connections, all this other stuff, we don't have a 30 meg block propagation problem. What some people said about all these so-called orphans and whatever, I don't know where they were coming from because they're not there. So there's 5% awful load of crap.
Yeah, and
it's always great how these people unscientifically just make up a story that in an immutable blockchain you can easily prove, and yet they never do.
Yeah, I also didn't see the data for that claim. I just read it on Twitter, and that's one part of the problem.
That's the whole point, isn't it? There's never any proof of double spends. I put out bounties, yet no one's taken them. Myself and others, back when the selfish mining lie and fraud was out there, and people were taking it seriously, the total was, I think, just under 1,500 Bitcoin, as in combined BTC, BCH, SV before the split Bitcoin, were put out. I think the total value, like 11 million pounds. And we even did a whole lot of things for the author of the paper, if he does this experiment and all the rest. Yet, academic, he would never do that. Right. I'm being academic. Academics are freaking greedy little pricks when it comes to getting money. If someone offers to prove your paper right, there's not an academic on earth who isn't a fraud, who wouldn't actually take it up. So a number, like I think it was Cryptartica, myself and others have all offered bounties on double spend. Yet no one ever taken us up on them. I actually offered that if anyone ever gets double spent following a proper procedure in a store, a merchant, I'll pay for it personally.
Yeah,
yet no one's ever taken it up. No one's come back to me and said, here's the proof. Away we go. Of course, the other part is I'll file a fraud claim. So when you defraud that merchant, I'll make sure that the fraud claim is filed, but go for it. I'm happy for you to try. I'll pay the merchant for any loss.
If double spends were so easy, we would already have seen it on a massive scale, because either you can do it, then you do it multiple times, 1,000 times, or you can't do it. And then
setting up my own wallet and saying which one succeeded or whatever else is a load of bull. I mean, the truth of the matter in a double spend is you go into a store and you get away with a crime. Not, I noticed on my own wallet that I was able to get a transaction in because I paid lower fees. The reality is that's not what you do with the merchant. The merchant has a fee requirement. If you don't pay it, you haven't paid the transaction. If you go in and you say, I don't want to pay the credit card 3%, then Starbucks doesn't give you your coffee. So this is the real world.
One of your most memorable tweets was recently that you found a fatal flaw with SegWit that you're going to publish in 1 year. Why, or did you give this 1 year time so everybody could prepare, or why 1 year delay?
I'm giving people time to to prepare. I'm not going to just dump everything and have the market crash. It will be bad for everyone, including us. So I think it's unfixable. They maybe think they can find something. We'll see how they go. As for if there is one responsible disclosure, well, I don't know if there is a responsible disclosure for something where it's actually unfixable.
So, and usually when I hear from white hat hackers, they communicate with the company, and then Microsoft or Google fixes the problem as a 0-day flaw. Did you communicate to Bitcoin Core this problem?
One, I don't care, and two, they are the flaw with Bitcoin, and three, there isn't a fix.
Okay.
It is SegWit.
Yeah.
you can't fix it. You have to remove what is Bitcoin to fix it. So Bitcoin Core have basically shot themselves in the head, and they don't realize it yet.
Yeah, and that's part of what's difficult for most people to understand. For me, it was also I didn't really understand what was happening at that time when they started with the block limit, and when then the block limit was full, it was like out of the world, and yeah, that's undescribable, and the normal person really hasn't acknowledged that yet. And I hope we can get like the information out there that the current the current leader of cryptocurrency is deeply flawed now, and that's usually doesn't happen in.
I would say that the one with the most price, but I wouldn't say that's a leader.
I see, yeah, with the highest
price. They're not
price.
leading anything. I mean, they're still running around doing this satellite bullshit.
That's actually the most interesting thing that they're doing, in my opinion. But
do you realize they're not even new satellites? They're Wright on satellite devices. And when I tweeted out a picture where parts of the world, including China, were blocked out in red, there's a reason. Raytheon aren't allowed to deliver services to North Korea. Raytheon aren't allowed to deliver services to Iran. Raytheon have negotiated a settlement between America, US, and China. So there are active blocking on all Raytheon signals in China. So basically, it's a satellite solution where over a third of the world's population are actually banned from using. And it propagates the whole stupid idea of everyone having to run a node.
Yeah, it's just that humans, once they have accepted something, they're difficult. It's difficult to convince them of something, to use something new. We are still using Skype, although it's not probably the best chat software anymore.
Nah, I don't agree with that one. That's because that's a debatable, arguable thing where some people think this is better or whatever else. It does the same function. It's basically cereal boxes. Kellogg's versus Sanitarium versus Nestle versus whatever else. We're not talking the same thing here. We're talking people calling themselves Bitcoin and Bitcoin. And none of them are Bitcoin anymore. They've gone off on a different path, and they have no relation to how it works. None of them understand Bitcoin. The core guys haven't the faintest, foggiest idea of what Bitcoin is. SPV is simple, remarkably simple. And next year when we put it out there, you'll see how simple it is. Except I'm being an utter bastard in that we're putting a patent on it, which I can do because no one's figured out the simple little trick to it, which is a slap yourself in the face and go, oh fuck, if you're a dumb non-technical person, simple trick. And these guys kept thinking about needing fraud proofs and overcomplicating it.
I see, yeah. And if you had to give like a projection for the next years, how long does it take for the network effect to play out, and then there will just be one Bitcoin and maybe the other coins and will also be out of use?
No idea.
But you also understand that the rest of the world grew quite fond of their developer team, and now they have to say goodbye to their old crypto and go back to
the rest of the world. If I randomly select 100,000 people, I think I would be lucky to find one who knows what the fuck Bitcoin or anything is.
Yeah.
They've maybe read a little bit in the paper about this drug money or something like this. And this idea that there are 100 million accounts or whatever else, there's not. There's 100 million coins. It's like saying every 5 pence coin that I have in my wallet is a new account. It's not.
I have a question. Like most business journalists talk about, like there's now huge trends, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and gene engineering. Is there a blockchain technology without Bitcoin? Is there an application for blockchain outside of the Bitcoin network?
No. It's just a Lamport signature scheme. The thing that made Bitcoin Bitcoin was the economics. The technology's 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that made it work is economic security.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's basically all my questions that I wanted to ask. And I just had like one more question. Like, people are usually afraid of hacking attacks. So, I would, in my projection, I'm an amateur, of course. I would always assume there would be 2 or 3 different versions. So with a different architecture, so they are not as easily hackable. So we use different operating systems. We use Wi-Fi, LTE, and Bluetooth. What do you say to that?
They're completely different technologies, and what you're talking about actually makes things more fragile. So you're using Wi-Fi, whatever else, that doesn't make you less resilient, less hackable. It makes you more. Each of those is an attack surface. So that's a completely, utterly wrong way of looking at it. The reality there is majority of people still have Windows. We're not distributed in that way because everything's connected. If your phone is hacked, then your computer is probably too. If your Windows machine is hacked, then so is your Linux machine because they're probably interconnected. The reality here is nothing to do with the operating system or the software. It's to do with the maintenance and the management. I did a paper that I presented in 2011 or 2012 following a whole series, like 1,000 different organizations were audited. It was an academic paper. And we looked at the actual cost of compliance versus security and whatever else. And the problem wasn't what people seem to think. It's where you focus your efforts on protecting. And the reality is people don't put enough attention on the right areas. They have crappy passwords. They don't patch properly. The reality was 99% of compromises were stupid little things that anyone could have fixed easily. Making sure that your patching is up to date. Not allowing sort of open browser access to every stupid site you can think of, or at least putting a warning up about them. Having antivirus software, those sort of things. Not 0 days, not all these special attacks or whatever else. The reality is, even from my forensic work, 99.9% of the break-ins, attacks, and whatever else are really, really simple, stupid things that you find the lowest common denominator in the organization, and you hand someone a free USB stick in the car park with some marketing logos on it and whatever else, and you watch them plug it into their computer. We did that to banks.
So you did real-world testing of penetration testing in the past.
Mm.
I only thought that would be part of like novels, the USB attack and scenarios, but I didn't know that people actually tested it already.
Yeah, I used to have some. I mean, I used to be involved with the guys at SANS quite a lot, and I give a shout out to some of the guys I haven't been in contact with for years, but I know, like Mr. Stratus there and Ed Scotus and others like the IntelliGuardians crew. Yeah, I remember some of the stories those guys got up to were insane.
And another astonishing thing for the normal crypto investor was when you were talking about stablecoins that there won't be any real stablecoins until like a central bank like the Bank of England would step into it and start a stablecoin. How do you see like the sharing of tasks that the commodity ledger of Bitcoin does and then this English stablecoin does? Is it like, what kind of coexistence would it be?
You create a token on top of Bitcoin and allow yen coin and renminbi coin and US dollar coin and cable coin and whatever else to all compete.
I see, yeah. Fairly simple, yeah. So that's also something I didn't expect, that it would run on Bitcoin as well. This is the government stable coins. That's interesting.
It's the best way. I mean, what people don't seem to understand is you can't have a private blockchain. Private blockchain is the same as the silly idea of a private internet. Yes, IBM went out there and sold everyone and their dog this stupid idea of a private internet. I remember the 90s. And they took lots of money for it, and they wasted millions from banks, but the reality is it's a dead-end idea. It was always a dead-end idea. Can only be a dead-end idea. The value of an interconnected network is interconnection.
I see. Now, one of the last questions is, you are a busy man, you are giving this interview to educate the public, you're probably writing already new patents that are going to be shown to the world maybe in 2 or 5 years, and you're also probably working on a larger vision for the next 10 years. And do you also work on improving the apps like Handcash and Sandbee, or what's your main focus right now?
I focus on the areas I'm best. I'm writing on sort of the legal, the economic, and the low-level stuff. So my team and I are creating, like, patenting and developing the SDK to allow other people to build better apps. So the Handcash team are part of our group now, so is Sandbee. The reality is I'll help create tools that enable those guys to make better things, because I couldn't write a bloody front end to save myself. People see my front ends and they laugh. My front ends are ugly pieces of crap that should never be allowed to see the light of day. I've given up on that one. Don't worry, I get it from Shadows and other stuff like Daniel, and they bitch at my code generally, but when it comes to looking at my design, yeah, they just laugh.
I see. And isn't it like a little bit overlapping? Sandbee and Handcash, they do more or less the same thing, and Handcash has also the point of sale part. But what's the strategy there?
Sandbee have sort of chat and the ability to add people by WhatsApp type interface. It's competition.
Yeah.
Unlike many groups, even when we have vested interest in the same ones. Well, that is by Samsung, and this tablet over here is by Lenovo, and my wife's got an iPhone. So, although I'd get rid of the iPhone part of it and put her on maybe a different Android one if I had a choice.
I see. So yeah, makes sense. And when I tested the Handcash, it was absolutely fast, and I think that's an innovation that largely nobody acknowledged yet. The last time every journalist focused on the crypto world was maybe in January 2018, and it wasn't available then, I think. And it's going to hit them as soon as they're going to focus again on this.
Yep. Yeah, Money Button's another good one too. I mean, if you played with Brian's sort of swipe bar and things, I mean, I actually think that's quite cool. There are lots of other uses I can see for that. If you tokenized signing of receipts and invoices and delivery dockets and things like that, we get rid of the dust limit, which happens next year, and allow you to send a tokenized invoice that is completely private because it's encrypted between the parties, and just swipe, done.
What's the dust limit?
The dust limit is the minimum amount you're allowed to send, which is, I think, still 546 Satoshis.
One thing for me as a YouTuber and my colleagues is also Patreon. That might be one day be switched to the blockchain. Is it possible to do monthly subscriptions?
Yes.
Would that like involve me pushing a button every month or so, or how does it? Can you?
No. You'd actually have the ability to pre-sign. Now, this is where everyone goes wrong. They think the templates in Bitcoin are it. What we need are people creating new ones, new smart contracts, new formats. That was something that really got killed off with Core, this whole standard idea. Now, if you can think about the different SIG hash types. So I can take anyone can fund type transactions where I have a signed transaction for the output, but I don't care about the input. So in a SIG hash format, I can sign it so that I care about the output, but not the input. Now, if I'm Netflix, for instance, do you think I care which coin gets paid to me?
No.
All I care about is that I get paid. So they don't care whether it comes from me or my wife's wallet or whatever else. So the truth of the matter is, it is then simple to have a wallet that allows you to spend as it comes in, but pre-signed transactions. So now the reality there is I still have to make sure that I have the money. If I've got a Netflix account and I've got a monthly payment and I'm in arrears and my bank account is negative, then the bank account will just stop funding my direct debits, right? Mm-hmm. The same thing happens with Bitcoin. And I could have an automated system. And Mike Hearn did some good work with Lighthouse, but that should be taken for all these things that you're saying. It can't be done, people say. Well, of course it can. You just need to have a different template. I need to have one where it's signed to you. Say I pay 0.1 Bitcoin every month. Or I can have a tokenized amount of US dollars that gets paid to you every month on Bitcoin. All these things are possible. But someone needs to just start thinking that they're possible and allowable. And that's what removing the sort of ability to do non-standard scripts has removed. Now, that's not a technical problem with Bitcoin. We're going to have non-standard scripts allowed on Bitcoin SV, the way it was originally. The denial of service attack bit, well, that's the whole core philosophy of, but the Raspberry Pis will break and we don't care.
Yeah, you already said, like, there always has been miners that dropped out of the network when it gets unprofitable. Exactly. Or when they're getting too old.
Like every business. Sometimes you have a McDonald's pop up and sometimes they go out of business. Sometimes a corner store will pop up and sometimes they'll go out of business. Sometimes big stores like Amazon pop up and sometimes they go out of business. So if you look at large mail order department stores of the past, like Sears, they were huge. They were the Amazon of their day. So Sears had the Sears catalog and managed to distribute all around America and even around the world. And then the whole mall aspect of things changed and different shopping malls appeared. And Sears actually started losing market share. And now we've gone to a different model with Amazon. And you don't think that's going to be the last one. In 200 years' time, we're not going to only have Amazon and no other way of selling. If you think that, you're crazy. I mean, innovation, human the more humans are out there thinking about how to change things, the more this is going to change. And there'll be new ways of doing Amazon, and they'll get replaced. So Amazon aren't here forever. They're just the best we have now.
Yeah. And they're trying to keep up. Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing's going to just keep happening. New innovations are going to form new companies in all of these areas.
Yeah. I agree, and that's why I'm always on the lookout, and that's why I heard about Bitcoin the first time a few years ago. Yeah, so thank you very much for your time. I hope we explained a lot to the people just that are wanting to get educated about Bitcoin SV. And I wish you all the success with the future development.
Very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And yeah, this video is I'm going to cut this video. I mean, almost real time, the full video, and upload it within the next days.
Okay.
Thank you. And maybe we can do this again sometime.
Okay. Sounds fine by me.